All right, folks, buckle up, because today we are diving headfirst into some seriously deep stuff. We're talking hidden knowledge, secret languages, and the one and only Aleister Crowley.
Oh, yeah, we're going deep with Crowley this time, specifically his wild and thought-provoking work, Liber 777.
This book is a trip, let me tell you. But that's why we're here, right? To unpack this idea of a universal language, a kind of Rosetta Stone for, well, everything. Crowley seemed to think it was possible, and he used this book to make his case.
And what's really fascinating is that Crowley doesn't just jump into building this language. He starts by figuring out what the problem is in the first place.
Right, like what's the root cause of all this miscommunication?
Exactly. He argues that humanity isn't divided by thought itself, but by the limitations of our languages. It's like we're trying to explain quantum physics with a mouthful of, I don't know, alphabet soup.
Okay, I like that analogy. So all those arguments, all those misunderstandings, maybe it's not just us, maybe the very words we use are tripping us up.
That's what Crowley thought. But creating a universal language, that's a bold move. So where does he even begin?
Yeah, he doesn't start from scratch, that's for sure.
He turns to the Kabbalah, an ancient Jewish mystical tradition.
And don't worry, you don't need to be a mystical scholar to follow along.
Right. The key takeaway here is that the Kabbalah uses symbols and connections to understand the universe and humanity's place in it.
So it's like a spiritual decoder ring.
Yeah.
And knowing Crowley, I'm sure he put his own unique spin on it.
Oh, absolutely. Crowley was never one to shy away from a good challenge, or controversy for that matter. He was a firm believer in the power of language, especially within religions.
Yeah, and he wasn't afraid to call people out when he thought they were abusing that power. Didn't he have some pretty harsh words for Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of Christian Science?
He did. He called her a mental prostitute for essentially rebranding God as mind.
See, classic Crowley.
Yeah.
Provocative, but always with a point. So what was he getting at with that critique? What was he so worked up about?
For Crowley, it all goes back to the power of language. He believed that by changing the way people talked about God, Eddy fundamentally altered their understanding of a divine power.
So it wasn't just semantics, it was about shaping people's worldview.
Exactly. And for Crowley, this was a prime example of language being used not to clarify, but to control. And that's something he saw as very dangerous, especially in systems of belief.
Okay, heavy stuff. So for Crowley, language isn't just about communication, it's about power and influence.
Right. And that's a crucial point to remember as we dive into how Liber 777 actually attempts to build this universal language.
Because I have a feeling it's going to be a wild ride. So how does he do it? What's the blueprint for this universal language?
Well, at the core of it all is this image called the Tree of Life, a central symbol in the Kabbalah. Imagine a tree, but instead of leaves, it's got planets and numbers and emotions, all these seemingly unrelated things.
Sounds like my last family reunion.
Right. But this tree is the foundation for Crowley's grand project in Liber 777, something he calls the Table of Correspondences.
Okay, and what is that exactly?
Imagine a giant cosmic spreadsheet where Crowley tries to connect every single element of human experience. We're talking about Hebrew letters, colors, plants, emotions, even our senses, all linked together in this intricate web of relationships.
So it's not just a random assortment of things. There's a method to this madness.
There is. And that's where things get really interesting.
Oh, I am ready for things to get interesting. All right, so let's get our hands dirty with this table of correspondences. Hit me with some of these Crowley-style connections.
Well, get ready for this one because we're going to talk about the Fool card in tarot.
Okay, the Fool, yeah, the one that's all about, like, new beginnings, right, taking a leap of faith.
Exactly. But Crowley, well, he takes it even further.
Oh, I bet he does.
He links the Fool to this concept of beginnings, but also to the element of air.
Air. Okay, I'm intrigued.
Think about it, the qualities of air. It's constantly moving, invisible, full of potential.
Right, like a breath of fresh air, literally.
Exactly. It's that breath of life itself. So the Fool's journey is like a gust of wind.
You never know which way it will blow you.
Precisely. And hold on, because it gets better. Crowley also connects the Fool to the Hebrew letter Aleph,
Which represents?
the number 1, new beginnings again. And then he throws in the color pale yellow for good measure.
Which makes me think of, what? New ideas, clarity, those aha moments.
There you go. He's weaving together this whole narrative about starting fresh new beginnings.
Using colors and elements and ancient letters. It's like he's saying the universe is speaking to us in this secret code.
And if we can crack the code,
we unlock the secrets.
Exactly. And he pulls from all these different traditions, Western mysticism, Eastern religions, you name it. Crowley wanted to find these universal threads connecting it all.
Sounds very kumbaya for a guy who was known for, let's say, his strong opinions. He was pretty critical of a lot of these same traditions, wasn't he?
Oh, absolutely. Crowley was a master of critique, and he wasn't afraid to apply that same sharp wit to the very systems he was drawing from.
So it wasn't just about blindly accepting these traditions at face value.
Not at all. He wanted to pick them apart, question them, really get at the heart of their truths.
More like a playful debate than a lecture.
Exactly. And that's what makes Liber 777 so fascinating. It's not just a textbook of correspondences, it's a conversation. It's alive with Crowley's own insights and interpretations.
Okay, so less about memorizing a bunch of facts and more about, like, actively engaging with these ideas.
Yes. He wants us to think for ourselves, to come to our own conclusions. He's giving us the tools, but it's up to us to actually use them.
It's like that teacher who gives you the most complicated puzzle and is like, good luck, kids, figure it out. But in a good way, right? Like he's saying, this stuff is important, take your time, don't be afraid to get a little lost along the way.
Absolutely. It's a journey of self-discovery. And Liber 777, for all its complexities, it's really a guidebook for that journey. It's about understanding yourself, the universe, and everything in between.
Well, sign me up. But let's get practical for a moment. How do we actually use this stuff? I mean, it's one thing to see all these connections on paper, but how does that translate into real life? So we've been talking about Liber 777 as this incredible toolkit, a way to understand the universe and our place in it. But how do we actually use these tools? I mean, it's one thing to understand that Venus is connected to love and beauty, but does that actually change anything in our lives?
That's the big question, right? And the truth is, there's no single answer. It's like learning a new language. You can study the grammar and memorize all the vocabulary, but until you start speaking it, living in that language, it won't truly transform you.
So it's not enough to just intellectually grasp these concepts. We have to find ways to live them, to embody them.
Exactly. Think about it like this. Some people might use the table of correspondences to deepen their understanding of tarot, for example.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
When you start to see those connections between the cards, the elements, the numbers, it adds all these layers of meaning to the readings.
It's like that light bulb moment when you realize, oh, the Tower card, which usually means chaos and upheaval. Well, it's also connected to Mars, the planet of action and energy. So suddenly all that upheaval takes on a new meaning, right? It's not just about destruction, it's about clearing the way for something new.
Exactly. Or you could use Liber 777 as a tool for meditation.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, think of each symbol or planet as a gateway to a specific energy.
Okay, I'm following.
So by meditating on these connections, you can start to tap into those energies within yourself.
Like having a whole arsenal of, like, spiritual power-ups at your fingertips.
Right. But remember, Crowley was all about personal exploration. He wasn't big on dogma or rigid rules. He wanted us to find our own way.
Which is both liberating and terrifying, right? Do what thou wilt. Sounds great on paper, but most days I can barely decide what to have for breakfast, let alone figure out my true will.
And that's where I think Liber 777 can be incredibly helpful.
How so?
Because by exploring these universal archetypes and symbols and connections, you start to see reflections of yourself in the most unexpected places.
It's like holding up a mirror to your own soul.
Exactly. And in those reflections, you might start to catch glimpses of your own true will, your own unique path. It's not about Crowley telling you what to think or believe. It's about empowering you to discover those truths for yourself. And that's a powerful thing. So was he onto something with this idea of a universal language? Or was it all just a brilliant but flawed thought experiment? I think that's something each of us has to decide for ourselves. But regardless of whether Liber 777 holds the key to some ultimate truth, it definitely gives us a powerful framework for understanding ourselves and the universe. It's a call to look beyond the surface, to question our assumptions, and to never stop exploring the mysteries of existence. And on that note, dear listeners, we leave you to ponder these cosmic connections. May your journeys be filled with fascinating synchronicities and unexpected revelations. And until next time, keep those minds open and those questions coming.